The next thing we're going to do is set up our audio. So right now we have our particle. If I hit play and we go around, we'll get the visual feedback, right? But we want the visual and the audio feedback, like that. So we're going to add that to the bumper. And we're going to do this in a very, very similar way as the particle. So this will just be reiteration and practice. So just like if you can look at my jump pad that I have here, we want an audio source, similarly childed like our particle. And the reason that I like to do that is just if I want the audio source to originate on top or slightly to the side, I can, I have individual control over that, where it's harder if you could technically just add it as a component onto here, or you could say audio source, and that would add the audio source component. But I actually don't want to do that because I may want to move this independently of the trigger. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to make a new child object of type audio source. And you can see this, like this is a separate object that I can move around. Now, by default, well, actually by default it's 2D, but you'll see this radius. This is how far the audio source, the maximum volume will be. So the larger this is, this is the minimum volume. The larger this is, the easier we can hear it. However, one thing I want to point out is that that only matters if it's a 3D. It actually defaults to a 2D sound. So if it's 3D, this is saying if I could only hear that if whatever my audio listener is, and if I click on my camera, you can see that, this is where my audio listener is. If my camera is inside of this radius, then it will be able to hear it. And this is all if it's a 3D sound. And you would want that because you would want to be able to hear footsteps behind you, or you would want to, if the camera's over here, you want to be able to hear that this bounce effect happened over this way. But in the case of most, let's say sound effects or gameplay specific sound effects, things originating from the player, you don't really need a 3D. You can actually make this 2D. And 2D just means that you're going to be able to hear it the same volume no matter where the audio listener is. So this is just saying, no matter what, just play this sound. We're not even worried about where it is in the level. Just play it at a particular volume. Cases where you might want 3D sound, for example, enemies, you might want to be able to hear that your enemies are coming from over this way. So you would want to make that a 3D sound. Audio emitters, like a torch over here, you would want to know that you would want that to be 3D. So as you approach the torch, it gets louder. But in the case of audio feedback, just, play it by ear. If you're not hearing your sound, it's probably because you have it 3D and your camera is outside of this radius. So I'm just going to make this 2D just so that this feedback is very clear. And I think in the case of bouncers and jump volumes or whatever, or maybe even music in the level, that's all appropriate to have that 2D. So first step, when I make my audio source, I'm going to make that a child object so that I can move this independently if I want. Maybe you have some sound occlusion and you wouldn't want that to get muffled throughout. That's not the default setup, but you could set it up that way. You don't have to mess with the volume, but I would turn off play on awake. You do not want to hear this right when the level starts. You only want to hear it when we trigger it. In this case, since similar to the particle effect, it's just fire and then it's over. You do not want this to loop, so make sure both of these are off. Make sure that it's a 2D sound. It will default to 2D, but in this case, I want this to be 2D. If you did want this to be 3D, you'd make it 3D, and then you'd make this radius much larger so that your camera was actually inside of the sound so that you could hear it. But I'm going to keep this as 2D. You don't need to worry about the other stuff, I think. Yeah, everything else is fine. So it's a 2D sound, so that'll fake most everything else. So right now, we're actually not going to hear it because we're not triggering it. Now, also, you have your audio source. This is just telling the engine how it wants to play an audio clip. We still have not defined what is the bounce sound that we're playing. And this is going to be put up in here in this audio clip section. If you click the little the dot right here, it will just auto sort all the audio clips that you have in your project and show you, and then you can choose from this list. For me, and right, this is just a reference to wherever you have these inside of your project. So I find it easier just to click that little drop down. And I actually already have a bounce sound made. You can use this, or you can make your own, or maybe another sound fits this better. Actually, maybe I want something different for my bumper. Let's see, maybe jump, checkpoint. We want something, in this case, enemy damage, maybe that'll work. You can preview it right here if you find the sound effect. That'll open up in a separate. Yeah, maybe that's not obvious enough. So let me try something different. Kill, respawn might be good. Jump might be good. What is unlock? Okay, let's say that that's fine for now. And again, you can choose your own if you think one is better. But for the purposes of just demo, I'll just say that that one's okay. To me, it sounds more like a collected something rather than a, some obstacle is hindering the player. But search around there, find something better. Okay, but we have our audio source, and this is how to play it. But we actually need to define this clip. Make sure that you define this clip. And this is all the setup that we need. So at this point, we're worried about the scripting, but we have our audio source set up, and then we'll go through and set this up in scripting in the next video.